I believe that the West wants to have servile people here. That is maybe acceptable humanly, even politically, but I think that it is needed to respect the sovereignty and legitimacy of the elected representatives. I'm not for the politics of imposing the solutions by foreigners. I'm clear about that.
The UK says it will send 40 of its troops to Bosnia-Herzegovina to prevent foreign meddling in October's elections. Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik condemned the move, saying it's actually London that's trying to interfere with his country's vote. Meanwhile, Russia says the UK is making indirect accusations of foul play against the Kremlin. But Britain has fired back, saying Dodik is trying to win votes by inventing fake threats to stir nationalist sentiment. And the UK warned he could be hurting UK-Bosnian relations. So is the UK trying to intimidate Serbs in Bosnia? Or is Russia the real threat to a fair vote? Well, joining me to debate this is Reuf Bajrovic. He is Bosnia-Herzegovina's former energy minister. In London is Neven Andjelic, author of the book Bosnia-Herzegovina, The End of a Legacy. And in Moscow, we have former Russian diplomat Viacheslav Matuzov. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Neven Andjelic, let me begin with you. Is Milorad Dodik inventing a fake UK threat?
I think he's blowing it out of proportion. The threat might be in the insistence coming from London on the rule of law and liberal democratic legacy that doesn't play well with his pre-electoral plans. So if you look at the numbers, right now there are only 6 officers in the EUFOR force in Bosnia-Herzegovina, 6 officers from the UK, and the announcement, public announcement, that there will be additional 40 added to this force is something that should be understood as a kind of normal procedure or ambition by the United Kingdom to play active role in the Balkans, in Bosnia-Herzegovina in particular, in future when they foresee a future without European Union.
Okay, so Reuf Bajrovic, if Dodik is doing this for votes, as is the claim by the British Embassy in Bosnia, let me ask you, you know the system, you know how the game is played there. Would he actually get more votes from among Bosnian Serbs by going down this route and creating a threat that the UK is trying to undermine the election?
Mr. Dodik is desperate. And in desperate times, people do things that don't seem logical or rational to any independent observer. So he's basically trying to find a way to take off the agenda the catastrophic results of his last 12 years in government. And he has really nothing to show for his 12 years of rule in Bosnia's smaller entity called the IRS. His claims are ridiculous. I agree with the British Embassy statement and the position of the Foreign Office, which is a logical one and a completely truthful one. Mr. Dodik is set to have a very tough time ahead, and he's going to try to do anything to show himself as the main client of Vladimir Putin in the Balkans, and attacking a very symbolic and normal engagement by the British government in this region is part of that wider strategy of trying to cozy up to Mr. Putin and maybe get additional funding from the Russian government, which would enable him to actually keep going politically.
Let's ask the former Russian diplomat if that's true. Viacheslav Matuzov, we've heard Peter Ivanov, the Russian ambassador to Bosnia, also say that the UK is meddling. Is this what's happening? Dodik is trying to cozy himself up to Russia and to demonize the West in that process. Does that stick?
Well, you know, today it's very difficult to watch any election in America, in Great Britain, in Europe, because we have internet, we have social network. I think that any person, not government, any person can interfere into electoral process. What position of Russia can I see from Moscow? Because of really threat of intervention, foreign intervention in local domestic affairs in Bosnia, in Britain, in United States. Russia is blamed as a main threat for electoral process in all over the world. Do you consider that Russia is such kind of power that can influence for election of American president, for example? Donald Trump is elected not by Vladimir Putin. He's elected by American people.
Ambassador Matuzov, can I ask you, sorry to interrupt you, let me ask you. So, you're saying that the Russians are being blamed for this and that maybe Dodik has a point saying that, the UK is actually a threat. But let me ask you then, given the nature of Bosnia-Herzegovina and the nature of the presidency, the tripartite system, why aren't we seeing any complaints or warnings from the Croats or the Bosniaks? Why are we only hearing it from Dodik and the Serbs who want to be closer to Russia?
I think that the president himself knows very well the threat that he is feeling. If he says that this threat is coming from the Great Britain, I think that it is his view. From the point of Russia, I think that any decision made by Bosnian people are right. And Russia will take any figure, political figure in this state, in European state, because Russia is interested not in struggle, not in clashes, political, military clashes in the neighbor European countries, but stability.
Okay.
Main point what Russia bothered of is stability of all governments.
Let me ask Neven Andjelic, do you accept that argument from the Russian perspective? They don't want to meddle. They don't want to steer it or bend it in any way. They just want Bosnia-Herzegovina to have a free and fair election.
I mean, this is what all diplomats of any country would have to say and would be saying. We can hear it coming from any kind of source, from any kind of government. But we should, let me just remind the viewers that basically Milorad Dodik 20 years ago was darling of the West, not of Russia, but darling of the West. He was the guy that the West played on in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in particular among Bosnian Serb ethnic community. And he changed, he shifted his allegiance, and he's looking for somebody who would sponsor him, who would support him. He's offering himself as a client. And I think there is more interest in Dodik finding someone to protect him outside because he lost this protection from the West, and he's offering himself to Russia. I'm not sure that Russia has that much influence. The only, not influence, but interest in Dodik. The only interest might be to make the West busy in this broader geopolitical situation when there is a kind of ongoing confrontation between the West and the Russia, between different kinds of regimes that are in place in Western liberal democracies and in increasingly authoritarian regime of illiberal democracy in Russia. I'm not saying one is better than the other. We can find examples of illiberal democracy elsewhere in the world. And there is a global contest that is ongoing, and Dodik is trying to play it to his own advantage. I'm not sure it is going to be successful, but it is attracting interest from both Great Britain or the West in general, and also from Russia.
So, Reuf, EUFOR's Operation Althea at the center of this debate because the UK wanted to boost its presence within that. And as was mentioned earlier, there's just a handful of them right now, and they want to add 40 to it. Has it worked? Has Dodik's claim made any impact? And are we seeing the EUFOR mission, I guess, tarnished in any way? Are people questioning their presence in the country from all communities?
Well, their presence is really not questioned for a number of reasons. Number one, Bosnia gained peace 23 years ago thanks to the very robust engagement of the United States and the Western states. Later on, the Blair government, the Brown government, Cameron, and now May cabinet are very much doing the same thing in the last 21 years. Namely, Britain's interest here, the way that is being understood in the region, is to keep things from going backwards. So sending 40 soldiers is not going to change dynamics on the ground fundamentally, but it is a sort of a tripwire force, which does not mean that it would be used as an effective deterrence, which is necessary under the Dayton Peace Accords. However, it is a very commendable move by Theresa May and her Ministry of Defense. I don't think Dodik really gained much traction electorally with this yet. This is an issue that is being played up by the media under his control, played up by the media under the control of the Russian government, which in many ways is very effective in spreading its message. And I would agree with what Mr. Andjelic said. There is a contest, there's a global contest between states led by Russia on one side and states of the Western world, the liberal democratic world, which is being played out here in the Balkans as well. Balkans has had the unfortunate circumstance that it was very often a playground which was first used to test certain ideas by the West and as well as by the Eastern empires throughout history, and was always the victim of such games. This time around, it'd be very wise if people in the Balkans, the citizens, would decide to actually take a pass, to basically let this conflict go on without any involvement by the states in the Balkans. I am somewhat skeptical that that will actually happen, because there are some incentives for the local elites to try to play up their connections to the Russian government or to governments outside the region, other governments outside the region. And I think that basically the West has underestimated Vladimir Putin in the Balkans and in Europe in general.
Okay, and for many people, this very debate could be an indication of just how unresolved things are, despite Dayton and after Dayton, in the Balkans right now. We look forward to a free and fair election on October the 7th. We'll be watching Bosnia-Herzegovina very closely. But for the moment, I have to thank all of you. Neven Andjelic, Reuf Bajrovic, and Viacheslav Matuzov. I thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers.